Hello everyone, my name is Derek Brown. I am with the Lincoln Financial Group, and I am here today to present updates to my PowerShell module that I have made over the last year. But first, let's get this part out of the way. Full disclosure, this is a community tool. It is not associated with SailPoint in any way. It is all me. It started off as a project to make my life easier, and by that empowering me to be more of a lazy administrator with my own tenants. So you might find some things in there that are very specific to use cases in my company that might not make a lot of sense, but that's probably why they're there. All right. So some highlights that I want to hit for what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to first go over the big changes that I've made since last year, which is also impacts what you need to do to get it up and running once you've got the module installed on your machine. Then I am going to tempt fate and do a live demo where I plan to build a couple access profiles and standard roles to show off some of the new classes that I've built. And then if there's some time left over, I can show you some other cool code features that have been added along the way. And then if you have any questions about anything that I've discussed, feel free to hit me up on the developer community in either the chat for the conference or just sending me a private message. All right, so what's new? I have completely changed the way authentication is stored from last year. While I did support quick and easy switching between production and sandbox tenants, that was done by creating two separate variables. I've now tied everything into a configuration variable, for lack of a better term. So that's where all the settings for your tenants will be stored, which I believe makes switching between tenants even easier. Last year, all the commands were defaulted to go against your production tenant. So if you wanted to switch over to Sandbox, you had to call that out on every single command. Now I have it set that you can control what the default tenant is, and I've even added support for ambassador tenants. So the get token command is the only one that is still defaulted to production. After that, whatever your default tenant is what they'll run against unless you override it with that instance parameter. And then for endpoints to hit things like accounts, sources, roles, access profiles, etc., things that are going to return a long list of items. I have added parameters to those commands to help build filters a little more easily, so you can just search by name, what the name starts with, only get items relevant to a particular source or identity, depending on what we're looking at. And then the last thing, as the name of this presentation implies, more classes, and we will get into that with the live demo. So the reason we're all here, actually looking at some code, when you get the script installed for the very first time, there is no longer a script that will run at the module's import. It was slow, it was clunky, and just kind of goofy, so like all of Stan's Money from one of my favorite South Park episodes, it's gone. On fresh installs, you will just need to run this update ID and org name command. The two parameters that you're going to be required to enter are the name of your production tenant and the name of your sandbox tenant. Ambassador, it's not pictured here, but it is optional for those of you who have one. You can also specify the scope for where you want this saved. System and user will permanently save what you input in your environmental variables. Local only will just save it for that session, so it will change those values only for your current PowerShell session. So hopefully for those of you in more of a professional services role, this will make it easier to bounce around between tenants. Because unlike me, you're probably in and out of different ones all day long. So once you've got that done, you are free to run the get token command, where you'll need to pass your client ID and secret. Yes, authentication is intentional because there's no config files for this, but that allows you to stay in control of your credentials. So if you've got a password manager, private or PAM tool within your enterprise, or just saved locally in some kind of vault in like Windows Credential Manager, wherever you want to get them, it's entirely up to you. But once you get that token, it will build that, again, what I'm just kind of calling the configuration variable, where it will store everything you need to know, and your tokens will refresh automatically. That was something that I took way too long to add. Alright, so now I'm going to tempt fate. So my plan, like I said earlier, is I'm going to create a couple access profiles, and I'm going to create a couple of standard roles, so no manual list. I am going to create some rules. And then, like I said, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me through the developer community. Alright. So, the first thing I need to get are the entitlements for the access profiles that I'm going to build. So, like I mentioned earlier, there we go, that's better. I've got it set so that you can kind of build searches on the fly, so I don't remember exactly what the name of my administrator permission for IT users is, but I know it starts with full. So I'm going to go ahead and run that, and instead of getting a long list of entitlements, I just get the one that I need. So I'm going to go ahead and run that again and save it to a variable this time so I can use it later. CIT admin should be nice and simple. Okay, so next I'm going to also create some an access profile from HR system, but I have two different sources for that both start with HR. So to make sure I get the right ones, let's do name, and because you can do starts with for a lot more than just the name on these, it is specified separately. So it's a little weird, but I'll hopefully find a way to clean that up a little bit down the road. So I just need the name and the ID, and bam, there we go. I've got my admin source for HR users and my employee source for HR users. So let's go ahead and get a variable set up for those. Admin HR. All right. And I guess basic HR. All right, and in the interest of time, I've cheated, and I just have the entitlement ID that I need for HR over here. So let me grab that real quick and get it. And I will also need my IT source as well, which I believe I just have the ones, so we'll do name, IT. Oop. Yep, perfect, got it. Okay, now that I've got everything built that I need to make this happen, I'm going to go ahead and create the access profile for HR. So, HR access, and this is not going to be super involved, just new access profile. Let's see, dev 2024 HR be the name. Give it a description, which is just going to be garbage because this is for testing only. And let's see, this needs to go against the admin version of the source because I'm giving God mode access to the HR managers with this. And for that, I need the entitlement ID. And, all right, hang on. I keep doing this every time I run through this. I've got to specify the owner ID, which is going to be me, which is stored here as part of that config variable I was talking about earlier for the ambassador settings, but I don't want to type this out every time, so I'm going to cheat. So now that I've done that, owner ID equals me. All right, no scary red text, off to a good start. So there you can kind of see the basic access profile settings. I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing for IT, but for this one I need to specify provisioning criteria because I don't have the administrator accounts separated from the regular user accounts. So I want to make sure that the entitlement lands on the right account in that source. So we're going to go ahead and do that with the command new access profile provisioning criteria. So first thing I've got to do is specify the operator for between groups. I've only got a single thing, so it doesn't really matter what it is. Let's see, the attribute name is going to be the user ID is what I'm looking at. Attribute operator. These are the ones that are supported, but in this case, I'm just looking for something, the attribute that contains this string, which is going to be A-, because that is the naming convention I set up for admin accounts when I stood up this fake source. Alright, so took that, no problem. So now that I've got the provisioning criteria set up, I can create the IT access profile. Let's see. Which is going to look a lot like the HR one with that one addition. Let's see, dev 2024 IT. Description, again, doesn't matter. Let's see, source, IT, entitlement. I called that something different, didn't I? Yep. And then the provisioning criteria, just pass that. And we have our IT access profile with some provisioning criteria. Alright, so the next thing I need to do is create the roles to assign these to. Yes, I know that updates have made that unnecessary, but I'm a little behind. So for the purposes of this demonstration, I still needed these access profiles. Alright. So I'm going to go ahead and do the HR one first. So the first thing I need to do is create the template to store the rules in. So that is going to just be pretty much an empty membership criteria. Actually, let's call it rules so I don't forget that. So that command is just simply new ID and role criteria. Only thing you have to specify here is the between operator. I'm going to use and for these. So I'm just going to create two groups that both have to be true. And that's it. Alright, so next up I'm going to use the new ID enrolled child command to create the actual child item to stuff into that thing here in a minute. Oop. Don't need to run it twice. Alright, so for the first one I'm going to do is going to be targeting an identity attribute that I created earlier today. Oop. Can you tell I'm not used to this keyboard? Alright, identity attribute, so that's specifying the type of criteria that I'm using. Next up is the operator. In this case, I'll be using equals. But if you want to see what the options are, here you go. Alright, criteria string. HR is quite creatively called human resources. And the attribute that this is stored in is department. And that's all I need there. So with that built, I'm on to my second set of criteria, which is checking to see if this person is a manager. So same command, but this time I'll be looking at an account attribute, but still using equals as my operator. This time I'm looking for the value true. Under the attribute name is manager. So with that done, I'm going to put it all together. So HR rules uses this custom class that I built, and one of the options it has on criteria is adding a nested child item. So I'm just going to pass the variable for both the variables that I created to that. And if I go ahead and convert that to JSON, you will see that it'll all put together quite nicely, which means now when I go to create the role, all I have to do is tell it that I'm creating a standard role, give it a name, just keep going with this, description, same thing, doesn't matter, and the membership rule is HR rules. Oop. Sorry, I forgot a few other things. Access profile, so HR access, and owner is me, and yeah, that's all that's required. And ta-da, I've just created a standard role without touching the GUI. So I'm going to do that again, but this time for the IT one. Let's see, so IT rules, ID, oop. Sorry, new, IDN role, criteria, between operator and, kind of the same approach. So that's all I need. This one is going to be both account attributes though. Looking at the username, I want to make sure that this the account that's getting it actually has an administrator account for the access profile to be assigned to. So new IDN role child, account attribute. You can also do entitlements, and those are the operator criteria string, so the name of the entitlement essentially and the source that it belongs to is what you would pass for those, but I don't have anything set up in my ambassador tenant for that, so we are just going to stick with account attribute for this. Let's see, contains, because this is going to look just like the access profile criteria. And user ID, because that's where it's stored, and source. Alright, with that done, on to the next thing, which is going to be targeting the department code of IT users. So, same command, new ID and role child, account attribute equals. This time it is IT0050. Attribute name, department code is what I believe I went with, yep. And that source is the, HR basic source is where that's saved. So just like with the HR role, I've got my criteria that I need to add the nested children to. So first up is the user, and do that again with department. And now I can create the role. Standard role, name, dev 2024 IT, description, and IT. Let's not forget this time. I think that, yep, that's it. All right, so I've just built a second role using standard criteria, and that took all of a couple minutes, and I didn't have to worry about trailing spaces, misspelled words, or just having to even track down an existing role to copy. Just by following the parameters, I was just able to fill in what I needed, have it do all the heavy work for me, so I could just throw it on to the new role command. So I think this will make it really easy to build out roles at scale and even edit them as things change. All right, so that's all I had for the live demo, so I'm going to go ahead and show some code that I ran earlier because, like I said, that department identity attribute did not exist this morning. So, first thing I wanted to do was get all the accounts in my HR source. Next thing I had to do was make sure that the department attribute actually contains something meaningful that I could use to actually target users, HR users, and since they're all under human resources, that's not a problem. After that, I needed to get all of my identity profiles so I could get a list of the identity attributes and the one that I wanted to update, which was this all employees one. So my get identity profile identity attributes command adds this nice little index member to the output, so you can quickly, like if you're wanting to replace one or insert one at a new position, you can quickly grab the numbers and be off to the races. So now that I've got everything that I needed to know to build this all out, I have to run the command to actually create the new attribute. So I'm just creating department name at the identity level. Nothing too crazy, nothing too fancy. Next up, now that I've created the identity attribute, I have to actually update the identity profile to use it. Since this is a new one, I'm adding it. So I'm doing an account attribute patch because I am just referencing an existing account attribute and putting it here at the identity level. I just decided to put it at position 6 because it doesn't really matter where it goes. I'm doing an add operation on the identity attribute department name, and that is going to be populated from the department attribute of this source. So with that patch built, the next thing I've got to do is actually update the identity profile. And I'm sorry, when you resize Windows Terminal, great app, love it, but one of its quirks is the spacing can get a little goofy for things that you've already done. So that's why this looks weird. But anyway, so I sent the update through, which is just to give, all I need to pass is the profile ID and then the patch object that I built, which was done up here. And as you can see, it returned, it looks goofy, but it did return the new settings for the identity profile and not a bunch of angry red text to tell me that I completely and totally screwed it up. And when I ran the get identity attributes command again, you will see that at position 6, we now have department name listed there. And then I'm also able to kick off identity profile processing with this handy command. The only thing you need is the ID, and I forgot my own code's output and stored it in a variable, thinking that it had a task ID that I would be checking for the progress of, but nope, just a nice little status code to tell me that it didn't fail. So next up, I grabbed all HR accounts again because I wasn't thinking I actually needed identities, so I'm using my search command and using the shortcut that I built into it to just search for identities that have an account in a specific source, in this case, the HR system. This was me checking the attributes of the first identity return to see if it had populated yet, and it didn't, so I tried refreshing it, still didn't. Yeah, if you're trying to get an identity, don't put the source in there, it's not going to like that. So yeah, did a couple tries, nada. So fortunately, I put this test identity profile command in here, which will kick out a nice table preview, so I can at least see that what I did worked. I was probably just being too impatient, which is not an uncommon problem for me. So next up, I want to talk about transforms because I know that's something that everybody just loves writing from scratch. Guess I shouldn't scroll down too far and give away all the good details. I took a very similar approach here that I took with the standard role criteria. There are classes built into it, and each operation is tied to a switch parameter at which you'll select right out the gate. And based on what you select here is going to change the output that, or the parameters that you're presented. So the test case that I built out earlier today is just a conditional transform using an account attribute reference. So the way this works is you have two ways to stitch these transforms together, which is, I think, where everybody probably struggles automating and coding these things, is they can go on forever. They can be infinite. So the two approaches with using these commands, if you want to go the no class route and just use PowerShell commands, because I'm guessing that's what most people are used to, all you have to do is start at the bottom. So since it's a conditional test against an account attribute, I have to do the account attribute first. So new ID and transform logic is the command. The switch parameter for account attribute, all I need to pass is the source ID for that, where that attribute is going to be found, and then what attribute is going to be used. There are additional options, but I'm just keeping this simple for demo purposes. Next up, I'm going to create the actual conditional logic. So I'm going to use the conditional logic switch. I'm going to give it a value to test, and this is going to be my variable. The variable to test against, I'm checking to see if someone is a database administrator, and if true, I'm just going to say they're a DBA. If false, I'm going to say they're not a DBA. Variable name, again, kind of got to reuse it, and it'll make a little more sense why here soon, but just use the same thing you did for value to test, and then variable transform, go ahead and put in the transform logic for the account attribute here. And you can see that that kicked out exactly what you would expect. We've got the structure that we need to send in that transform. Now, if you're not sure how to stitch those together and just know what transforms you want to build, you can leave, like this is not required, this is not required. I believe this is the last parameter that's required for a conditional, so you can build it without the variable key built in the JSON, or without the transform nested yet. And then once you have built that transform, provided you don't, swap out a period for a comma, you can use this method that's on the class I built for conditional transforms by passing two arguments, the name of the variable and the transform that you want it to contain. So this is going to look really goofy because I've essentially just here it was originally, and I just added the second one using the same logic again just to demonstrate it. And then once you're satisfied that you have your transform logic in place, all you have to do is run this publish ID and transform command, give it a name, which you can see I've been really creative with the names I'm using today, and then pass the transform logic, and it will submit it, and you're done. So hopefully this is something that will make everybody's lives easier. I don't have all the transform operations built out yet, but now that I've done this enough that for me, I find this so much easier and I can get them built so much faster. I will definitely make building out the rest a priority throughout the year. So keep an eye out on my PowerShell on the PowerShell gallery in GitHub. And Colin has invited me to add this to the collab. I just need to stop procrastinating. So that's all I have for you today. Thank you for tuning in. I am going to go raid their snack bar now.